because condensers are a piece of shit. I don't know why nearly every blog recommends a Blue Yeti mic.
The lenses are more important than the camera. It's not about degrees and qualifications, it's about can you make a good product. If you can make a good product, that's all that matters. Start with what you got, and then once you get into it, once you get better, build it up from there.
I was using my phone for the longest time and I was focused on one thing. It shoots in 4K. Why is that not the answer though? Welcome to Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. I started my first podcast in 2019 just as a hobby, and I turned it into a business, 7 Million Bikes Podcast. We are now one of the top podcast producers in the world. We've worked with over 100 clients, produced thousands of episodes, helped with millions of downloads, and helped many shows get to the top of the podcast charts. If you want to work with 7 Million Bikes Podcast, then just go to our website, 7millionbikes.com. There's a button right in the top right-hand corner that says Talk to Neil. That's me. You can book a call with me and I can go through how we can help your podcast. Now, I'm sitting here in the Saigon podcast studio. If you've been listening, you'll know that we just opened this up less than a month ago, and we're now open for business and having people come into the studio to record their podcast and even their online courses as well. Today, we had someone come in who has had over 10 years experience in video editing, 20 years in audio, has a master's degree in music production, and runs online courses sharing his knowledge about music. Now, he came in earlier than planned to help set up. Even though we'd set up, he knew a bit more than we did, and he was showing us how to use the cameras, and he even offered to stay behind afterwards and share that knowledge. So this is the most impromptu episode of Smarter Podcasting ever. I was going to record today, but instead, my guest said instead of just sharing his knowledge with me, he's going to tell me so I can share with you how to set up your cameras and your lighting to help you make the best podcast possible. So I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Tomas George. Thomas, thank you for coming on Smarter Podcasting.
Hello. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So you have been doing audio and music production for a long time.
Yes, especially audio. I started off doing audio production, playing in bands, writing my own music. And then I got into teaching music online. And then from making online courses, I learned about video production, like camera settings, lighting. Already knew a fair bit about microphones, but now I've kind of taken it to the next level by studying up to try and make the best courses possible.
So I have a question that is going to probably make me look really bad. What are your thoughts on people like me who come into this business with no knowledge, no background? I got a degree in sports science, and somehow I think that I know enough to create my own podcast business with no degree in audio or music production.
Well, you don't need a degree necessarily, but you need the skills and the knowledge. But I guess you just start from where you're at and then just constantly keep building, constantly learn new stuff. Like, it's not about degrees and qualifications. It's about can you make a good product. If you can make a good product, that's all that matters. If the listener doesn't really care what bitrate you export in, they care about does it sound good? Does it look good? That's all that really matters.
That makes me feel so good. Thank you so much. And that I think that is, for me, that is a focus. I've never thought about it like that. It's the end product. I've looked into bitrate. I look at what's the best bitrate. I know there's different hertz for microphones and things like this. I don't really understand all of that. And my team will tell you, because I'm quite strict with them as well. Like, I know what sounds good, and they will send me a product. This happens today, and I have to send it back to them. And I'm like, no, you've missed this 1 second where I can hear a blip. And I'm sorry that might seem so facetious, but I'm not going to give this to a client if it doesn't sound good. So that makes me feel really good. So when you came in today, what were your first impressions of the Saigon podcast studio?
It's cool. I like it. The main thing I like is it is a podcast studio available to hire. Like, there's not many places you can go and hire a podcast studio. There's a few places you can hire a music production studio, which is fine, but they don't really have cameras or lights. I've not really seen any video podcast studios in Vietnam, actually. So this is the only one I know of.
I do like to say that we are the first and the only dedicated podcast studio in all of Vietnam, which is pretty damn cool. So you're here today to tell me how to do this better, because as I said to you, and I don't have a background in this, right? The reason for the delay in opening this really over the years, because I've been wanting to do this for years, is my lack of knowledge with cameras and the expense for one as well, right? So again, I'm not an expert on audio, but I know what sounds good. I could record a good podcast. We've won some awards. We know how to make good podcasts for our clients. But video it's just a 10x, a 100x. I say this to people as well, like, oh, our charges to edit video podcasts is nearly double what it is audio. And I have to explain to people, like, it's so much more work to edit a video podcast than it is to edit an audio podcast. Never mind then setting up all the equipment as well. So for someone setting up their podcast for the first time and they're going to make that leap, they're going to go, I'm going to do video, and they have that same anxiety that I've had. I don't know how to do this. What would you tell them?
Buy many hard drives. I think I must have, no joke, I must have 50 terabytes of video files. It's so much, it takes up so much file space. So be prepared to have a lot of storage. Unfortunately, be prepared to spend a lot of money. The cameras on your phone are pretty good, but when you get a mirrorless or even a DSLR camera with a nice lens, it makes such a big difference. You don't have to spend tons of money, but if you get a nice Sony mirrorless camera, a nice 50mm lens or whatever lens you want, get a nice one with a nice low f-stop number, you get that blurry background, you can make it look really cool. But the thing that annoys me the most, but it's really essential, is lighting. Today we spent so much time setting the lights. But you have to learn it. You have to just do it. Trial and error. The first one you're going to do is probably going to be pretty bad. The first 10 you're going to do is probably going to be pretty bad.
The first 10 I just showed you. So this is one of the first. We just started doing episodes here with the lighting and the cameras, and I was doing them at home. And I have these kind of cheap lights, and I was just so excited. I was like, wow, this looks amazing. It's so bright. But now, just after being here for a month, I showed you the episode, which just came out today, and I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, it looks awful. Explain why that looked awful.
It was overexposed. Everything was just whitewashed. You also, I'm pretty sure you filmed on your phone, so you didn't get like that shallow depth of field. You didn't get that blurry background. It was just flat and white, and yeah, it just looked, not very good.
So the funny thing is, for somebody like me who doesn't know anything about cameras, I was using my phone for the longest time and I was focused on one thing. I was like, oh, it shoots in 4K. Why is that not the answer though? Because you just mentioned about depth of field and something called an F number, which I barely know what that is. So someone listening might not know what it is either.
So it's just the amount of pixels that are in the space. So the more high quality, it's more 4K, 5K, it's just more pixels, just more dots. So it's sharper. It doesn't necessarily mean it's better. If you get the shallow depth of field, if you get that blurry background, that's how you can make it look cinematic. That's how you can make it take it to that next level. If you just film it really sharp and it's just a flat background or the background's just rubbish, it's just not good. It's just sharper.
Yeah. You said a great word there as well, cinematic, because I'm saying this because all these terms are new to me. And I imagine that you listening right now, they might be new to you as well. Somebody messaged me not long after we opened and they said, are your cameras cinematic? And I was like, ChatGPT, I have a Sony a6400. Is this cinematic? And it was like, long answer, no. Short answer, yes. You can do some things. What does that even mean, cinematic? And how can you get that effect? And why is it important?
Well, you do get specific cameras for cinema, but they are very expensive and they normally only have manual focus. So if you're going to move around like this, you don't want manual focus. And for cinema, or a certain scene, they actually have a person's job is just to move the focus ring. So if someone's walking, they have to manually move the focus in time.
What?
Yeah. All the cinema cameras are manual. So if you get a red camera, for example, that's a manual focus camera. So for regular people who are just going to film by themselves at home, don't get one that is only manual, or you have to stay completely still or hire someone to move the focus ring. So you want one that has a good continuous autofocus. But if you get like a good Sony mirrorless camera, like the A7 Mark IV, for example, which is a good one, it can give that cinematic effect, but it's not a cinema camera. Yeah, but as I said, the stuff isn't cheap. If you're starting out, do you really want to spend £2,000 on a camera? You might give up after a while. It might not be for you. I'd start with what you have. And then when you start to love it, when you start to get into it and you get better, then upgrade your gear. Don't just spend loads of money on equipment. Like I see people do all the time. Like maybe you go to the gym, right, and you spend all the money on the fancy equipment and you give up after a few weeks, which I've done before. Like I'm not going to spend all that money on fancy like weight belts, so I'm not going to use them. Same with microphones and cameras. Start with what you got, and then once you get into it, once you get better, build it up from there. Because as I said, it's not cheap. This stuff is expensive, and if you're starting out, just use what you got. It doesn't have to be perfect. The first 10 episodes, as we said, probably won't be very good. And just learn, keep try and analyze what you're doing. Keep looking at your videos. How can I make this better? What have I done wrong? Like some of my videos from like 8, 10 years ago, I look at them now and I cringe. They're so bad. And at the time I was like, this is the best. And now I'm like, what have I done? I can't believe that's online.
I love this. I absolutely love this because it ties into my story and what I teach people and what I teach my team and I teach myself as well. I always say, and I didn't make this up, I took this from someone else, always try and be 1% better every time. And if you can do that every time, eventually you're going to be 1000% better. And I do the same as well. So I wanted to get into video, no money for it at all. But I was like, I need to start. And I know that is where a lot of people stop. It goes two ways, right? They either go, I'm going to buy everything and then give up, or I'm going to buy nothing and give up, right? And I started with like a 720p camera, webcam, no lights, recorded myself. I had to read my screen so you could see my eyes looking at the screen, even though it was a camera. And it's just awful. But I would never get to where I am now if I hadn't just done that. And then, just mention even a month ago, I was filming at home on a 4K camera, thinking that was amazing with bright lights. I'm like, these lights are amazing. And now I'm like, oh, there's no contrast and there's no this and there's no that. And it's awful. For you tuning in right now, you might want to start your first video podcast. You've been doing audio or you've not got a podcast at all, but you want to start video. One thing I would say is if you're starting right now or you already have one, got to add video. It's just the thing. And it does cost money and time. And you're mentioning hard drives as well, like storage, like things I didn't even realize about as well. You got to get a lot of storage, but I'm digressing. So what would you say to that person that wants to start doing video right now? They don't have a massive budget, but they want to get started.
Get something secondhand. Go on eBay or whatever website and buy something secondhand. Borrow a camera from your friends and just learn how to use it properly. Learn about what frames per second you're going to shoot in. Learn about shutter speed. Learn about aperture. Learn about ISO. Learn about white balance. Learn all the manual settings yourself, and you can still make a half-decent camera look good if you set it up properly. Like I came in here before and I was like, what? Why is your shutter speed at 125? This should be at 50. It's still filmed in 25 frames per second, yeah? Yeah. Why is it not 150th? So for example, in frames per second, if you're in the PAL region, which we're in now, you need to film in 25 frames per second. So PAL is Asia, Europe, mostly Asia and Europe. And NTSC is, I believe, Japan and America. That's 24 frames per second. So you need to film double that. So you need to film at 150th. And for North America, you round up to 150th as well. So first of all, set the shutter speed, double the frames per second. For a talking video podcast like this, you want it either 24 or 25 frames per second. Next is the aperture. So that's how you can get that blurry background effect and you actually let in more light in the camera. So a lower f-stop number, the more light comes in the camera and the more blurry background. But for example, this camera here, there's two of us. We might not necessarily want a background too blurry unless we're exactly in the same place, which we are here. But say people are slightly off, you might want to have it less blurry so they're not like too out of focus. So you could set like one at f4, for example. But if it's just one person, you want that nice, cool, blurry background. So get a lens that's like 1.8, 1.4 if you can, so you can get the cool, blurry background effect. So that's the aperture. And then the ISO, that's the digital light. So the more digital light you have, the grainier and worse it looks. So ideally, you want to have enough lights in the room so you can have a low ISO number. Ideally, 80 or 100, whatever your camera will give you. So that's the exposure triangle, which is shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So if you can set that up, your camera's going to look pretty good. Then you get white balance, so you can change like the blues and the oranges and stuff. Auto's pretty good, but if the lighting changes slightly, or if you turn the camera off and on again, it might change a little bit. So if you can set a manual white balance, that'll make it look good as well. The natural light is 5,500 kelvins. So if you set to that, that's like outside temperature, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I read as well.
There you go. That make
I
it.
just wanted to jump in about the natural light, which I pointed out to somebody recently, and this is why when we chose this location, we have no windows in here, so we could be recording this at 8 in the morning or 8 at night, and it's the exact same. Is it correct when I told somebody this, and I hope it is, that if you record in natural light, even though it's the best light, the light changes throughout the day, which means you're gonna have to change your cameras throughout the day. Is that correct?
Well, if you're doing everything in one take in the podcast, if it gradually changes over time, it's okay. But if you're doing cuts all the time and the orange and the blues are changing, it could look a little weird. But you can get blackout curtains. I used to do that in one place. I used to film and have blackout curtains, put them on, and you can't.
No, but I mean, they were going to use the natural light because they didn't have light.
It's okay to start with. If you do a podcast all in one take, that's fine. But if you're doing cuts, the light could change. So it depends on how you want to do it. But the lights are pretty expensive. Some of the lights are quite noisy as well. Like this one over here, obviously it's out of shot, but this one over here does have a fan. You can get silent lights as well. They're bigger and heavier, more expensive, but you can get them without a fan, so they're silent as well. Where we are now, you need to have the aircon on as well. So it can get noisy, but you can add effects on your microphone. Well, not your microphone. Add effects in post to kind of remove any background noise and stuff.
And when you mentioned in the beginning about buying a camera secondhand, which was the same advice I was given, and for the model, I couldn't find any secondhand version, so I ended up buying brand new, but the price wasn't massively different. What models do you suggest? Because you mentioned some models, and that was quite intimidating and scary for me when I started to look, because there was the Sony ZV-10, was quite highly recommended, but that is more for vlogging because it's more of a movement camera, and I was like, no, these cameras are going to stay still, they're not going to move. And then I was worried about price as well. And yeah, it's one of those things like you kind of mentioned as well. You can spend almost as little or as much as you want. I've talked to people about this, and I'm like, I mean, you could spend $50,000 on a camera. $50, like, it's a big, big difference. But what models for someone starting out would you recommend to use?
If you do the podcast, there's two things you need to think about. Will it overheat? And what's the maximum record limit? So there's many cameras as well. Like back in the day, the Canon 70D I used to have. Nice camera, it's pretty good. Maximum limit, I think 20 minutes. So not really suitable for a podcast. And if you get like a crop sensor camera, one of the smaller ones, sometimes they can overheat. So for a video podcast, I get like a big mirrorless camera that has no maximum film limit. And I'd get like a 250 gigabyte memory card so you could film for like, I don't know, 6 hours if you needed. So just get a big nice camera that's not going to overheat. Stuff like the Sony, what was it, the ZV-10, that's fine for going out and doing vlogs and stuff, but because it's small and lightweight, if you're doing a podcast, does it need to be small and lightweight? Probably not. It depends on your budget. The one I mentioned before, the Sony A7 IV, that's a good camera. The Sony A6700 is good as well. That's the crop sensor, the smaller one. But I would probably say if you have the budget, go for the Sony A7 Mark IV. I use the Sony A7S III as my main one because I do some slow motion music video type stuff, which you don't really need for a podcast, come on, unless you're doing like a dramatic intro. But yeah, Sony A7 IV, if your budget allows it, it's quite expensive, but it's a solid camera. £2,000 maybe to $2,500.
So we went for the Sony A6400s on advice, and I was actually looking at more expensive ones, but a photographer came and gave me some advice, and he's like, to be honest, because these are from 2019, they're brand new, but came out in 2019. He said, they've not really changed that much. They charge you thousands of dollars more for the newest model. He's like, it's a couple of extra fancy things that you're never going to use for a podcast recording. So he was like, get the A6400. And he's like, get it secondhand, which, as I mentioned, I couldn't find secondhand. So these actually cost less than what I budgeted, which was nice. And a couple of people that have come by so far said they're perfect. I hope, as an expert, you think this.
They're perfectly fine. The newer version is the 6700, but these are crop sensor cameras. So these will kind of crop the image in. If you get a full frame, you'll get a higher resolution, and it'll be a bigger camera that won't overheat. For example, I film without aircon on, sometimes hours at a time. I don't think it's ever overheated for me, but it's more expensive.
Now, you mentioned about F numbers, and one of the things that I had to learn, because I've just had to learn so much, was about lenses. So we have so I'm going to get this wrong, 50 millimeters is looking at me right now, right?
You've got 50 millimeter, 1.8.
50, and then this one is 16, the main one, and then another 50 looking at you. And I had to learn this. So 16, I've no idea what that means, but it means it's wider. So it's capturing both of us. And then the 50 millimeters is for both. It's just for individuals. I've had to learn so much because I just thought cameras were cameras, lenses were lenses. You just buy it, you point it, you turn it on. That's my knowledge. I know, I'm sorry, I'm disappointing you. So tell me a little bit about lenses and why they're important.
The lenses are more important than the camera. If you have a decent lens, you can get that cool blurry background. You can make it look really nice. And you want to get one with a low f-stop number if you want that blurry background. If you can't get any lower than 2.8, you're not really going to get a blurry background. And that's what makes it look cinematic. So a 50 millimeter is kind of what's natural to the eye, which is why a lot of people use 50, because it looks very natural. It's like they're stood there in front of you. If you want a more wider lens, you could get up to 24. Any wider than 24, it can start to warp a little bit. But I personally like using the 85mm. It's a lot more flattering. It's used for photography a lot. So if you want to look better, I would use an 85mm lens. But for podcasts, I think 50 is fine because it looks natural. I guess for a podcast, you want to make it feel like the person's there talking with you. So I'd probably go for what you got here, like a nice wide to capture the two people, if there's two people, and then a 50mm kind of portrait lenses.
Awesome. So shopping list, quick tick list for what somebody needs to buy right now if they want to start a video podcast.
A camera, a lens, and some lights. And of course, most importantly, a microphone.
One of the things that I find challenging is the cost, because I can look online, like even just recently I was looking at RGB bulbs. I was like, this one's like $3 and this one's $30. And then you realize, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, at the end of the day, the cost often comes down to quality. You can buy cheap, it's not going to be the best, but you can get started. That's the main thing. You can spend more later on and move down the line with that.
Exactly. Well, what's more important than cameras, in my opinion, is audio. So I'd say it's most important out of all the stuff for a video podcast is to treat the room. Get a room that sounds good. Doesn't sound too reverberant, doesn't have any echo. It sounds dead. Because when you hear sometimes like a huge like reverberant room, or there's like, in Vietnam especially, motorbikes, horns and stuff, you want to have a quiet room that sounds dead. You can get a nice natural sounding podcast, but it feels like the person's there. They're not talking in the cave. So yeah, treat your room, get some foam on the walls, get a big carpet, and just record somewhere quiet.
And what type of microphone should they get? You said about getting a Blue Yeti condenser microphone, right?
Get out. No, if you have a really well-treated room, a condenser mic can be great. For music production, for example, when people sing, they generally use a condenser mic. It picks up the high frequencies of the voice, so it can sound really nice. If you have like a U87 microphone, for example. But for a podcast, I'd use a dynamic mic. A dynamic mic can sound much better in a poorly treated room, and it's just safer to record with a dynamic. A condenser, there's so much stuff can go wrong. It picks up so much background noise, so much room sound. A nice dynamic microphone like the ones we've got now will work perfectly fine.
And this is what I love, that, as I said in the beginning, I have no background in any of this, but this is exactly what I tell people and I teach them as well. And I do it for myself because condensers are a piece of shit in most rooms, in most podcast rooms. And I don't know why nearly every blog recommends a Blue Yeti mic condenser microphone.
Because these kind of microphones are XLR mics, you need to plug into an audio interface. So it's like an additional piece of equipment you've got to buy. A Blue Yeti, a USB mic, it has it built in, so it's just plug and play. So it's easy to get started with, but it's not ideal in most situations.
I think what has happened is microphones have developed, but these blogs haven't, because like this one here, the Shure MV7, I think it is, you can plug and play. It has a USB port. My favorite microphone is a Miono PDX200. PD200X has a plug and play. I think all these blogs are just 5-10 years old that, yeah, they were easy because they were plug and play and people didn't want to buy a mixer and things like this. Whereas now you can buy a really nice and cheap dynamic microphone that plugs into your computer.
This microphone I'm using now, the Electro Voice RE20, I think it's been around since like the 70s.
It looks like it.
It's a really like old microphone. It hasn't changed in such a long time. But if you see many podcasts, they'll use this microphone. Like the newest doesn't necessarily mean the best. I've used this microphone for 10 years. I don't want a new one. I've tested so many out. This, in my opinion, works best for my voice. At home, I do plug into like my own dedicated preamp, but when I travel, I have like this little portable called a FET head. It's like a gain booster. It gives an extra, I think, around 30 dB of clean gain. So with dynamic mics, you need a lot of gain. And sometimes on your audio interface, if you crank the gain, you can get hiss. So if you get a cloud lifter or a FET head like this, that can like reduce some of that hiss sound as well. So it's important to think about the gain level as well for your microphone.
I hope this has helped you so much, and I hope it's inspired you to either start your podcast or take your podcast to the next level. Remember, if you want to get in touch with me, go to 7millionbikes.com, book a call with me. I would love to help you as much as I can. I don't have a degree in music production, but I do know a lot, I think, about making good podcasts. Remember, rate and review this podcast, and please share it with someone else so that we can help them make the best podcast possible. Thomas, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for joining me on Smarter Podcasting.
Thank you. It's fun.
Cheers.